Yo! So today I want to share a few stories or experiences I've had with hearing entities and hearing telepathic thoughts. Around the age of 25 or so, I started to hear the voices of entities. I honestly thought I was going mad when I first started to hear the barely audible faint voices or muffles of entities. It freaked me out, so I tried to ignore it. However, the voices wouldn't go away. It would be a few more years before I'd finally realize what was happening or find out why I was hearing these faint voices in my head. When I was about 28 and a half years old, or around the end of year 2012, I stumbled across some websites about crystal children for the first time. I was shocked when I read about star children or indigo/crystal humans for the first time. It described me perfectly, and it finally made sense what I was going through. It wouldn't be long before I'd be introduced to Reiki later that year. I fell in love with Reiki instantly. Shortly after my first Reiki experience, I started to attend public Reiki healing circles, where I would eventually meet my Reiki master or teacher, Patricia McHenry. She knew right away I was a star child, so I asked her if she could teach me Reiki. I was roughly around 29. And around September of 2013, I got my first Reiki attunement. A week or so after my first Reiki attunement, I started to download information from source. Tons and tons of complex, fascinating ideas raced through my mind. I would spend hours trying to get these thoughts onto paper, which took hours and hours to do in the form of pictures to show the ideas I had downloaded from source. And if you don't believe me, I have a few samples right here. So this is one, like mirroring numbers on the clock using the infinity symbols. Merkaba, right? And the numbers on the clock being mirrored once again. More circles and numbers of a clock being mirrored. But there's more. There's more. Here we go. The rainbows of light on the infinity scale with the music notes. As well as mixing the colors right here. And then more symbols like that. And then these are music notes being mirrored on a music clef going in the infinity symbol shape rather than straight lines. And then for a simplified view of that, this is the same thing except on just a circle of music notes. And doing the same thing except the music notes are being mirrored to the light, the rainbows of light, the spectrum lights, colors, 7 of them. And this goes into converting the 12 chakra colors into the 4 pairs of DNA base code, to talk about that, and music notes on the infinity symbol and more sacred geometry type things. That as well, music of a clock being mirrored, more geometry with numbers being mirrored to make different shapes. The same concept shown once again. I don't know how well you can see that. So, and then here we go with the rainbow colors. That's probably more beautiful. And then this as well. And copper, right? So anyways, I would draw pictures like that. And then I'd write things, about my thoughts on paper using words or write about it in my journal. And the things I wrote about were quite surreal. Such as I'd write things like, mirroring concave and convex. If one were to mirror the movement of the hands on a circular clock, one would notice that the direction of hand movement mirrored each other, complementary similar to that of a color wheel, where values don't quite align at a straight angle, but at a bent angle or curved. I'd write things like that. And there's no way that anyone else would be able to say everything I wrote in my journal word for word. So this also helped confirm that I was hearing entities. If the entity was a male or a man, the voice sounded like the Red Rum voice from The Shining, like Red Rum, rah. And then the female entity voices sounded like the voice of a woman singing soap opera. Except, but it would be the talking with a falsetto tone rather than the singing, right? And it took me a while to be able to differentiate between whether it was someone else's thoughts that I'd hear telepathically, or if it was an entity's thoughts. And the entities tend to have default voices, or at least in my case, they tend to have default voices for, entities or ghosts that I never knew in person, or animal on Earth while they're alive. So, in terms of hearing telepathic thoughts, when I was around 30 years old, I realized I was starting to hear telepathic thoughts, similar to hearing entities. The voice you would hear would be barely audible or very faint. Many times I wouldn't even know what they were saying because all I would hear were the muffled tones of their voice, which was too quiet to hear the words they were saying. I would hear the tone, though, and know whether they sounded angry, annoyed, amazed, confused, or any other emotion often heard in someone's voice when talking to you or another person out loud. It would sound like the person's voice, though. But again, I wondered if I was going crazy at the time and wondered if it was just my imagination making up people's thoughts that I heard in my head. I would tell myself not to make such assumptions about what others were thinking and ask myself, who am I to think that I would know what others are thinking without even asking them or not even listening to what they have to say first? However, there were a few times when I did hear the words of what someone was thinking. This happened twice with two different people at work. The first occasion was with a coworker who I knew who was a typical, stoner. The second occasion, it happened with my manager. We'll call her Anne, who I was really good friends with. First, I'll describe the occasion when I heard my coworker's thoughts. This coworker, we'll call him Hippie Boy, and I got along well. When we were working together, we'd often talk about things like music, life experiences, school, or whatever else. Anyway, one night, I raced into work to get my laptop near the end of Hippie Boy's shift a few minutes before he'd close the store and lock everything up for the night. I accidentally scared him when I ran into the store since he wasn't expecting anyone to come running through the doors like I did. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," I said to him after I grabbed my laptop. Right after I apologized to him, I heard his thoughts in my mind by hearing him say the words, "Yeah, she's cool," in a tone that sounded just like him. The next day or so afterwards, my manager said something to him like, "Would you be okay working with Adria tonight, or today?" I don't remember exactly what she said to him, but she said something like that to the hippie boy. And he responded, "Yeah, she's cool," using the exact same tone of voice, with the exact same words that I heard in my mind a few days earlier. His thoughts I heard in my mind sounded identical to what he had just said out loud. The second time this happened, I caught a cold and I was losing my voice while working with my manager Anne one day. My voice sounded very squeaky and rather ridiculous. In my mind, I heard Anne saying, "Gosh, your voice is annoying." I could hear the irritation in the voice of Anne's thoughts, and I felt self-conscious about the way I sounded with a cold, even though she hadn't said a word to me that day. The following day or so, my voice was still sounding the same since I still had the cold. Then Anne said out loud to me, "Gosh, your voice is annoying," with the exact same tone of voice that sounded identical to what I had heard in my mind a few days ago with the exact same words. That's how I knew that I was able to confirm that, in fact, I was able to hear other people's thoughts sometimes. I also remember doing a face painting for a birthday party for kids after I turned 30. There were a ton of kids there, and we were all playing around in the park. They seemed to really like me since I let them draw with face paints all over me and even in my hair. At one point during the party, I had to go to the bathroom while I was still playing in the park with them and playing games with them. So I told the kids I needed to go to the bathroom and that I would be right back. While I was going to the bathroom, I remember hearing the voices of children's thoughts, those children's thoughts that sounded like chipmunks, like Alvin and the Chipmunks, that kept on saying, "Come play with us. We want you to come play with us. Come play with us." I do remember the kids being impatient that day too, about waiting for me to come back outside and play with them again that day too, as well. Also, when I was about 33 years old, I started to really bond with birds and had started bird feeding for a while when I actually heard the birds' telepathic thoughts. And this didn't really faze me this time just because I kind of had an idea about hearing other people's telepathic thoughts. But basically, what I'd hear was like the same kind of cheap tone of voice of a sparrow or chickadee. It would sound like, Idra, come save us! Help us survive! Save us! You know, help, Idra! I'd hear their thoughts. And then I also remember during migration season one night in bed, I remember hearing a bunch of birds like basically chirping, but there's no way since I was in my bedroom. They're hundreds of feet up in the air at night, but I'd hear like these very short, abrupt chirps, like a cheap marching band where it's like cheeping out like short demands, like, you know, march left, march right, like go, like in those, you know, short, abrupt sentences, right? Except it was the bird cheeps instead for the birds migrating. Well, the next day I read about bird migration and I find out that birds actually do make short, abrupt chirps while they migrate, which I didn't know till, you know, that day practically when I found out after hearing the birds telepathically migrate. So, on a few occasions, yes, I've heard birds, specifically probably house sparrows, say a few telepathic thoughts. So those are my experiences with hearing voices in my head.